He said it so casually, like moving me aside was normal. I stood there holding the pillow, still warm from sleep, and tried to understand if I'd heard him right. "Just for a while," Tom said, eyes already on his mother's suitcase. "She needs the bed. Her back can't handle the stairs." I wanted to argue, but the words stuck. After 30 years of marriage, I thought kindness meant compromise. That morning, it felt like eviction. I'm 52, and I've learned that losing ground starts with small steps. That night, I moved my blanket to the couch, telling myself it was temporary. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, a low reminder of how much space he suddenly needed between us. I could smell the faint sweetness of the tea I'd left on the counter, already cold, already forgotten. The next morning I made breakfast like nothing had changed. The kettle hissed, the toast popped, and I poured coffee for him and his mother. She smiled, pretending to refuse, and he insisted again, gentle, attentive. I watched his hands brush hers as he passed the cup. The ring on his finger caught the morning light, a flash that hurt more than it should have. The warmth in the room wasn't comfort. It was performance. We used to talk over breakfast, about bills, work, and the small things that made days feel shared. Now, his mother filled the silence. She spoke of her pain, her sleepless nights, how her son was her only strength. He listened with that soft patience he once saved for me. When she reached for his hand, I saw gratitude in his eyes, directed at her, not me. The room smelled faintly of toast and lavender lotion, and I knew I'd been replaced in more ways than one. By afternoon, I noticed her luggage spread open on the dresser, my folded clothes pushed aside. I stood in the doorway pretending to tidy, but the sound of their laughter came from inside, private, close. I looked away. "Don't worry," he called out. "We'll figure the sleeping arrangement soon." I said nothing. My voice would have cracked if I tried. Later that evening, I scrolled through my phone, searching for proof that this was just kindness. Instead, I found his text to his brother. "Elaine's being dramatic. Mom needs peace." My stomach tightened. That single line confirmed what the quiet hadn't said. I wasn't part of his comfort anymore. I was the problem being managed. Around 11 o'clock p.m., I lay on the couch, staring at the clock above the TV. Each tick felt louder than the last, slicing through the dark. My body ached from the uneven cushions, but it wasn't the couch that hurt. It was the memory of sharing a bed, of waking to his breath beside me. I could hear faint whispers upstairs, laughter again, muted by the walls. Money crossed my mind for the first time. The mortgage was under his name alone, the savings account, shared, but rarely balanced. I had trusted him to manage it, too distracted by routine, to notice the shift in control. Dependence was always a risk dressed up as love. I promised myself I'd start checking balances again. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. "They're family," I whispered into the dim living room. But even family has borders, and I could feel mine shrinking. Every object around me, the blanket, the framed photos, the coffee mug, looked the same but felt foreign, as if I were borrowing my own life. The clock ticked past midnight. The laughter stopped. A door upstairs clicked shut. I tried to sleep, clutching the edge of the couch cushion like it might keep me from falling further. My eyes traced the ceiling's faint cracks, thin lines spreading like fault marks across a calm surface. In the quiet, I made a small promise to myself. Not out loud, not yet. I would stop pretending. I would start watching. The house had changed, but so had I. That night, the door stayed locked far too long. I counted each thud like it was a heartbeat. At first, I told myself it was the wind or the pipes, but the rhythm was too deliberate, soft, uneven, followed by a muffled laugh. I turned the volume down on the TV, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. Around 9 o'clock p.m., rain began tapping against the window, the kind that fills silence instead of breaking it. I sat there listening, trying to believe I was imagining everything. Tom's mother had been upstairs for 3 weeks now. He said she needed rest, but she was more active than I'd ever seen her. Every night they went to bed before me. Every morning I found breakfast already made. He'd leave cash for groceries on the counter, like I was staff. Once he even said, "Mom's better at managing these things. Let her handle it." I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt. But I noticed the grocery money shrinking, $60 one week, $40 the next. Small losses, easy to ignore if you're not paying attention. By the third night of those noises, I decided to act. I told Tom I wanted a home camera system for safety. He agreed quickly, probably glad I was thinking about anything other than us. I ordered one online, cheap, discreet, motion-triggered. When it arrived, I told him it was for the front door. But that night, I placed it in the hallway, angled just enough toward their bedroom door to catch what sound alone couldn't explain. At midnight, while they slept, I checked the live feed on my phone. The screen was black and gray, the hallway still. I waited. Then a soft glow filled the frame. His mother's lamp, the door half open. Their voices were faint, but close enough that I could make out tone, not words. A low hum, then his voice saying, "You're fine, Mom. I've got it." My chest tightened. Something about the gentleness in his tone didn't belong in that room. I pressed record. The next morning, I tried to tell myself it meant nothing. Families help each other. Maybe I was reading too much into shadows and whispers. But curiosity, or fear, kept me from deleting the file. That night, while rain hit harder against the glass, I sat on the couch and watched the clip again. The camera caught her hand brushing through his hair, his head resting too close to hers. There was no kiss, no proof of sin, yet something inside me screamed that the line had vanished. When he came downstairs, I closed my phone fast. "You're still awake?" he asked, stretching. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Too much noise." He laughed softly. "You're hearing things again." Again. Like this had happened before. The way he said it, so calm, so certain, made me feel foolish. He poured himself water, the sound of the faucet covering everything I wanted to ask. I stared at the door handle as he went back upstairs. I realized the door was always locked now, even during the day. By 2 a.m., I was still awake. I replayed the clip once more, then deleted it. My thumb hovered, and I saved it again to a hidden folder. Deleting was what a weak person would do. Saving meant I still had options. I stopped leaving the bedroom light on after that. The camera stayed where it was, silent witness. The rain didn't stop for 2 days, and in those hours, my thoughts grew sharp. I started to notice how much control she'd taken. His meals, his schedule, the way he checked in with her about everything. Even bills. She began signing checks for the house, saying Tom was too busy. When I asked, she said gently, "He trusts me. You should too." That line stayed with me. Trust me. The same words she'd used before taking over my kitchen, my bedroom, my husband. I started counting hours instead of days. At 5 p.m. each evening, they'd eat upstairs together. At 10 p.m., I'd hear the same whispers. Every tick of the clock felt like proof, but not enough for anyone else to believe. I knew what people would say if I told them. She's just jealous. She's unstable. So I decided silence would be my weapon. Watch. Listen. Wait. The footage grew into a pattern, small moments stitched together like a secret life unfolding behind one door. I didn't know what I was waiting to find, only that I couldn't stop. Every betrayal starts with a decision to ignore what you already know. I pressed play again, and my breath stopped. She served me last, then forgot to serve me at all. The words slipped from my mouth before I could stop them. Ruth looked up, her smile sharp enough to cut the air. "Oh, I must have missed your plate," she said, voice honeyed. Tom laughed. The others followed. The room filled with the kind of laughter that hides discomfort. I sat still, pretending it didn't matter, even as my stomach turned. The smell of roast meat filled the dining room, rich, heavy, impossible to ignore. It was her favorite dish, not mine. She'd made a point of reminding everyone. "I thought we could all enjoy something comforting," she said, glancing my way. "After all, guests should feel at home." That word, guest, landed like a slap. I was the one who had lived there for decades, yet somehow I'd been demoted to a visitor. Tom's brother tried to shift the mood. "Elaine always loved your cooking, didn't she?" he asked lightly. I caught the flicker of sympathy in his eyes. Ruth chuckled. "Oh, she's modest," she said. "She knows when to step aside and let others take care." Tom smirked, cutting a piece of meat with slow precision. "Let Mom handle things," he said. "She's better at keeping order." I looked at the empty spot before me, the napkin folded perfectly where a plate should have been. It wasn't an accident. This was a test, her way of seeing how far she could push before I broke. The clock behind me ticked past 7 o'clock p.m., each second dragging through my restraint. My hands stayed in my lap. "You're quiet tonight," she said, tilting her head. "Tired?" I nodded. "Just not very hungry." My voice sounded foreign, too calm. Money slipped into the conversation the way it always does when power changes hands. Ruth talked about paying the landscaper. Tom mentioned rearranging the joint account for convenience. I caught a glimpse of his wallet beside her plate, open, her fingers resting near it. That small detail burned itself into me. It wasn't just the meal she was taking control of. It was everything. My house, my place, my worth. I could hear my own pulse louder than their chatter. I tried to focus on the smells, the scrape of forks, the sound of water pouring into glasses. Little things to keep from reacting. A hand brushed mine under the table. Tom's brother again. Quick, discreet. A reminder that someone else saw what was happening. I looked up, and he gave the slightest shake of his head. "Don't give them what they want." "Elaine, could you grab the salt?" Ruth asked. The tone was soft but commanding. I passed it wordlessly. She smiled wider. "Such grace," she said. The table laughed again. The performance was complete. One woman framed as kind, the other as weak. I sat through every second, memorizing faces, words, gestures. Proof wasn't just in documents or recordings. Sometimes it lived in moments everyone thought would vanish once the dishes were cleared. By the time dessert came, I was invisible. My fork scraped porcelain no one noticed. Ruth told stories about the old days, when Tom was young and perfect. She painted herself as a saint who had sacrificed everything. He listened like a child again, eyes soft, chin resting in his hand. That's when I understood her motive. It wasn't love, it was ownership. She didn't want his care. She wanted control. To erase me, she needed him to need her. When the meal ended, I carried plates to the sink, ignoring her protests of, "Oh, let me do it." Her laughter followed me down the hall. I stood at the counter, washing dishes that weren't mine, smelling the last traces of roast fat and soap. Behind me, chairs scraped the floor, voices lowered to whispers. I didn't turn around. Later, alone in the living room, I replayed the dinner in my mind. The missing plate, the laughter, the wallet. All of it fit together too neatly. I picked up my phone and scrolled through settings until I found the voice recorder. My thumb hovered over the button. If she was going to turn every kindness into an attack, I needed to protect myself. I pressed record and set the phone beside me on the armrest. The front door creaked. Tom's brother stepped in, pretending to have forgotten his jacket. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, though my throat was tight. "You're not crazy," he whispered. "I see it too." His brother's message read, "You're not crazy." I found my name scratched off a document. It was late morning, sunlight cutting across the room in thin lines as I wiped dust from the dresser. Cleaning had become my quiet rebellion, my way of reclaiming small corners of the house she now ruled. When I pulled open the lower drawer, something caught my eye. A metal key taped underneath. I froze. Tom hated locked drawers. He said they made homes feel like offices, but this one had been sealed for months. The key fit easily. Inside, under a pile of folded papers and receipts, lay an envelope marked transfer. I opened it slowly. My fingers brushed against crisp pages, legal documents, formal and cold. The property deed for our home stared back at me, except my name wasn't there anymore. Ruth's was, neatly written where mine used to be. I traced the spot where my signature should have been. A faint outline remained, pressed into the paper, as if erased, but not forgotten. When I asked Tom about it that evening, he didn't even look up from his phone. "It's just temporary paperwork," he said. "Mom's helping with taxes." "Helping how?" I asked. He sighed. "You wouldn't understand. It's complicated." "I can read, Tom." He glanced at me then, sharp and tired. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" That question wasn't a question. It was a warning. I walked away before he could see the tears gathering in my eyes. My trust had been rewritten in ink, replaced by a stranger's name. The house smelled faintly of polish and paper, sterile and false. I could almost hear the drawer closing itself behind me. The next day, I made a copy of every page. My hands shook as the printer hummed, the sheets sliding out one by one. Proof doesn't comfort. It burns. I folded the copies into a plain envelope and tucked them into my purse. If Ruth could take my place on paper, she could take anything. Silence wasn't safety anymore. It was surrender. That afternoon, Tom's brother called. "You free tomorrow?" he asked. His voice was calm, but serious. We met at a small cafe near this courthouse, the kind of place where nobody looks twice at quiet people talking. I slid the envelope across the table. He read the first page and stopped. "You need to show this to someone," he said. "I know a lawyer, old friend. He'll keep it quiet." "Do you believe me?" I asked. "I do," he said, without hesitation. "But they'll come for you if you move too fast." I wanted to believe caution would save me, but deep down I knew inaction was their shield. The lawyer's office was small, cluttered with books and quiet authority. He flipped through the documents, brow furrowing. "Who filled these out?" he asked. "My husband," I said softly. "Or his mother." He tapped a page with his pen. "You realize this isn't temporary, right? Your name's been removed from the deed. That's fraud." The word landed heavy. Fraud. A crime dressed as family duty. I thought of every bill I'd signed, every grocery receipt she'd tucked away for records. Each small act had been part of a larger plan, to erase me politely. When I got home, Ruth was in the kitchen humming. She handed me a check for household expenses, $200 less than usual. "Times are tight," she said sweetly. I nodded, hiding the envelope under my coat. She didn't need to know I'd already found her weakness. Proof. I went to bed early, pretending exhaustion. In truth, I lay awake until midnight, the faint scratching of her pen from the next room filling the dark. The smell of ink drifted through the hall, sour and deliberate. I wondered what name she was writing this time. The lawyer's words chilled me. "This is fraud." His voice said my name like it was a curse. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and the house was heavy with quiet. I'd left a small recorder under the couch cushion earlier that evening, pretending to fix the throw blanket while Tom was upstairs. My fingers had trembled, not from fear, but from the certainty that truth needed witnesses now. Through the ceiling came the sound of their voices, his low, hers sharp and rehearsed. I couldn't catch every word at first. Then his tone hardened, the way it does when he forgets who's listening. "She'll be gone soon," he said. "Stop worrying." Gone. The word rolled through me like thunder. I pressed the recorder closer to my ear. Ruth's voice followed, hushed and smug. "You'll handle it?" "Of course," he replied. "She won't see it coming." I sat in the dark living room, the lamp's soft glow cutting across the floor, trembling as if it were alive. For months I'd questioned myself, wondering if I was imagining things. Now I had proof, cold, mechanical, undeniable. Still, proof doesn't stop the heart from breaking. When I heard his footsteps heading downstairs, I turned off the lamp and pretended to sleep. He passed the couch, pausing just long enough for the air to change. "You awake?" he asked quietly. I kept still. He sighed. "Didn't think so." Only after the bedroom door clicked shut did I exhale. My hand reached for the phone. I replayed the file, the sound small but deadly. Each syllable pressed against my skin like a bruise that wouldn't fade. At dawn, I forwarded the clip to my lawyer. His reply came an hour later. "Be patient. It's not enough yet." I wanted to scream. Not enough? The man who promised me a lifetime had planned my removal. How much more did anyone need? That morning I made coffee and watched Ruth rearrange the kitchen again. She replaced my dishes with her own, claiming they were easier on the wrists. She hummed a tune that scraped my nerves raw. When I poured her tea, she smiled as if we'd never shared a single cruel moment. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "Barely. Too much on your mind?" "Not anymore." The lie tasted bitter, but it felt good to say. I'd spent so long being polite, it had become a weapon against me. Now I was done. By noon, I made a decision. No more cooking, cleaning, or pretending to care. When Tom came home, he noticed immediately. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "I'm not hungry," I said. He laughed. "That's not what I asked." "Then you'll have to ask her," I said, nodding toward the kitchen. His jaw tightened. "Don't start this again." I already did. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not guilt, but panic. Control was slipping. That realization steadied me. That evening, Ruth brought me a cup of tea. Her movements were slow, graceful, deliberate. She placed the cup in my hands like a peace offering. "You must be tired," she said softly. I looked into her face, pretending to search for sincerity. "I am," I answered, tired of pretending. She tilted her head, smiling too sweetly. "Careful, dear. You don't want to make enemies in your own home." "Then maybe I should leave it," I said quietly. Her hand froze midair. For the first time, her composure cracked. She leaned in, her perfume too thick, her words nearly a whisper. "You'll regret this." The tea steamed between us, smelling faintly of mint and something else I couldn't name. I held her gaze until she looked away. That was the moment I knew the war had shifted. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about power. And I had finally stopped asking for permission to fight back. She poured the tea and whispered, "You'll regret this." He said, "If you confront now, you'll lose everything." His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was heavy enough to crush air. The lawyer sat across from me, fingers tapping a stack of papers marked with coffee stains. "They've already positioned you as volatile," he continued. "If you challenge them without a financial trail, they'll make you look unstable. It won't just be your house you lose, it'll be your reputation." I looked at the papers again, my name still missing, the ink on Ruth's signature too fresh. The smell of brewed coffee clung to the room, sharp and bitter. It reminded me of mornings when Tom used to bring me a cup before work, before kindness became currency. "I can't just stay silent," I said quietly. "You shouldn't," he replied. "But you need proof that can't be dismissed as emotion. Dates, transfers, receipts, every dollar matters." "How long will that take?" "As long as it needs to," he said. "You're building a case, not starting a fight." His briefcase clicked shut, a sound that felt final. As I walked out of his office, the afternoon light hit the glass door, and I saw my reflection. Tired, smaller than I remembered, but still standing. I had entered that room a victim and left it with an assignment. That night, Ruth greeted me at the door like nothing had changed. "You were gone long," she said, setting down a plate of cookies. "Did you see the doctor?" "No," I said, hanging my coat. Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh? Tom said you were struggling again. He thought therapy might help." The word again scraped against my skin. I smiled, the way people smile to avoid open war. "I'll consider it," I said. She touched my arm gently. "We only want you to be okay." That's how manipulation sounds, like care with a knife hidden behind it. After dinner, Tom handed me a small folder. "Budget adjustments," he said. "Mom helped me simplify things." Simplify? That meant control. Inside the folder were printed statements. Joint accounts moved, cards canceled, savings combined. The handwriting in the margin wasn't his. "It's just easier if she handles it," he said. "You've been stressed lately." "I'm not sick," I said. He didn't answer, just turned away. That silence said more than words. He'd already chosen his side. By 10 p.m., I sat alone at the dining table with my laptop open. I started listing everything, every grocery trip, every transfer, every utility bill. The paper stack beside me grew, and with it, a kind of strength I hadn't felt in months. Proof didn't just expose lies, it rebuilt reality. I began transferring small amounts back into my personal account, $25 here, $40 there, just enough to move without raising alarms. My hands shook each time, but not from fear, from adrenaline. Each transfer was a heartbeat, a reminder that I still existed inside my own life. Around midnight, Tom appeared at the doorway. "Still up?" "Couldn't sleep." He leaned against the frame. "You're obsessed lately. It's not healthy." I closed the laptop. "Neither is betrayal." His jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, "just talking to myself." He stood there a moment, studying me like a stranger. Then he turned off the hallway light and went upstairs. I waited until the floorboards stopped creaking before opening my laptop again. I saved the new spreadsheet under a name only I would recognize, an old address, long forgotten by him. Every hour after that blurred together. The glow of the screen lit my notes, the contract copy, and the faint ring from the lawyer's coffee cup still marking the corner. That stain reminded me of his warning. Don't act out of rage, act with precision. I wasn't a woman losing control anymore. I was a witness building her defense. When I finally closed the laptop, dawn had already touched the window. I allowed myself one deep breath, the kind that sounds like freedom, even if it's just borrowed for now. The next morning, my bank access was revoked. Zero balance glared at me like an insult. It was 8:15 a.m. when I logged into my account before heading to the store. The number on the screen wasn't just low, it was gone. Zero. Every dollar I'd tucked away quietly, every transfer I'd hidden under small labels, vanished overnight. For a moment, I thought it had to be a system glitch. I refreshed the page. Same result. My hands went cold as I checked the savings account. Closed. Then the joint account. Locked. The debit card lay on the counter like a useless piece of plastic. I pressed it between my fingers, trying to stay calm, but panic began to crawl up my throat. When Tom walked into the kitchen, I asked, "Did you change anything with the bank?" He looked up from his phone, blank as always. "What are you talking about?" "My accounts. They're empty." He frowned. "Probably a technical issue. Happens all the time." "I called the bank already," I said. He paused. "Then what did they say?" "They said a joint withdrawal was made, authorized by Ruth." His expression didn't even flicker. "She was just helping," he said. "You've been under pressure lately. We thought it'd be easier if one of us managed things for a while." "One of us?" I asked. "Or her?" "Don't twist this, Elaine. That's what you said about everything." The silence stretched until the clock's ticking filled the air. I could hear my own breath, shallow and uneven. I wasn't broke because of an accident. I'd been erased. At 10 a.m., I sat across from the bank manager, my debit card resting on the desk like evidence from a crime scene. "Your husband and his mother initiated transfers over the past week," she said gently, sliding me a printed log. "Each was verified from the joint account." "All of them?" "Yes, every last cent." Her pity made it worse. I folded the printout carefully and slipped it into my purse. The paper felt warm, like it still carried the memory of my money. I walked out into the sunlight, blinking hard. Power wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. "It's financial abuse," he said flatly. "I'll file an injunction, but we need documented proof of transactions, receipts, call records, anything that shows intent." "I have plenty," I said. "Good, because once you move, there's no turning back." I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. No turning back. The phrase felt like both a warning and permission. When I returned home, Ruth was already there, standing in the hallway with a fabric tape measure. "We're finally renovating," she said cheerfully. "Fresh start for all of us." "Renovating what?" "The upstairs rooms," she said, smiling as if we were planning a party. "You'll love it once it's done." I looked past her at the couch, the same one where I'd been sleeping since she moved in. "And where am I supposed to stay?" "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's temporary. You can use the basement until things settle." "The basement?" "It's quiet down there," she said softly. "Might help with your nerves." Her words were sugar-wrapped poison. I realized then this wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Every move, every lie, every helpful gesture had been crafted to make me small. But I wasn't small anymore. That night, I spread the documents across the dining table. Bank printouts, withdrawal logs, transaction slips with matching times. I started recording calls, saving every voicemail, taking photos of receipts before Ruth could shred them. My phone became my shield. When Tom came home, I was still there sorting papers into neat piles. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Organizing," I said calmly. "For what?" "For when this ends." He scoffed. "You're losing it." "No," I said. "I'm documenting it." His laugh was soft and cruel. "You really think anyone's going to believe you?" "They won't have to," I said. "They'll see it." He walked away muttering something under his breath. But I didn't follow. I just watched his back and realized for the first time I wasn't afraid. The next morning, Ruth called a family meeting about the renovation schedule. She spoke like a hostess, outlining her plans while Tom nodded. I listened, smiling. When she finished, I said, "Go ahead, renovate." The way she blinked, just once, too slow, told me she didn't like the confidence in my tone. I didn't care. The house, the money, the silence, they'd used them all to box me in. But now I was done being cornered. I was watching, and that terrified them more than anything. I smiled and said, "Go ahead, renovate." He saw the bruises I hadn't noticed yet. I was standing near the kitchen sink when he walked in, unannounced, his voice breaking the quiet. "Elaine," he said, "what happened to your arm?" I looked down then, finally seeing the purple mark spreading under my skin like spilled ink. I hadn't even felt it forming. Maybe I'd stopped feeling a long time ago. "It's nothing," I said, reaching for a towel to dry my hands. "I fell yesterday." "You fell?" His tone was flat. "On what?" "The stairs." He didn't believe me. I could tell by the way his eyes followed mine, searching for something beyond the words. The refrigerator hummed behind us, a sound that somehow made the silence worse. He stepped closer, brushing his thumb near the edge of the bruise before I pulled back. The air felt heavy, the kind that comes right before a storm. Ruth appeared at the doorway, smiling like a woman greeting guests at a dinner party. "Oh, you found her," she said warmly. "She's always bumping into things. You should have seen the bruise she had last month." The lie slid out so easily, it almost sounded like truth. "I'm fine," I said again, but my voice trembled just enough to betray me. Ruth noticed. Her hand moved toward my shoulder. "You really must be more careful," she said softly. "You've been so distracted lately." I stepped away. "I said I'm fine." Her smile froze for a second, then returned even sweeter. "Of course." My brother-in-law turned toward her. "Has Tom been home much?" "Oh, he's always working," Ruth said. "He does everything for this family. I don't know how he manages the stress." Her words were gentle, but the edge was sharp. He nodded slowly, then looked back at me. "Can we talk privately?" She hesitated. "I'll make tea." When she left the room, he leaned closer. "Tell me the truth," he whispered. "Did he hurt you?" I stared at the window. The glass showed our reflections, his face tense, mine unreadable. "It's complicated," I said. "No, it isn't," he said quietly. "It's wrong." I wanted to believe him, but believing meant doing something, and I wasn't ready. That evening when Tom came home, his brother was waiting in the living room. I was upstairs, listening through the thin wall. "What's this about?" Tom asked. "You know exactly what," his brother replied. "Stay out of my marriage." "Then stop making it a crime scene." A chair scraped. Something hit the floor. I heard Ruth's voice cutting through the argument, sharp but trembling. "Stop it, both of you." Then quieter, Tom muttered something that made my stomach twist. "She asked for it." There was a pause, long enough for my heartbeat to count to 5. Then my brother-in-law said, "You should never have said that out loud. I didn't know it at the time, but he had his phone recording in his pocket. The lawyer would later call it accidental evidence, but I knew better. It was deliberate. A line had been crossed, and someone besides me had finally seen it. After they left, Ruth came upstairs carrying an ice pack wrapped in a dish towel. "You need to calm things down," she said sweetly. "Tom's upset and I don't blame him. You've been stirring trouble." "I didn't start anything." "Then stop reacting. It's embarrassing for everyone." Her concern was fake, but her control was real. I took the ice pack, pressed it against the bruise, and kept my face blank. "Thank you," I said, just to end it. When she was gone, I sat on the edge of the bed, the cold seeping into my skin. I realized that silence had become my language. But someone else had started speaking for me now, and that changed everything. The next morning, the lawyer called. "I received something last night," he said. "A voice recording. It's clear enough to act on. We can file for a protective order." "Who sent it?" "Your brother-in-law. He's not letting this slide." For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I said, "He's the first one who believed me." "Good," the lawyer said. "Now we'll make them believe the rest." By noon, I found myself looking at my reflection again, just like before. The bruise had deepened, dark and undeniable. But so had I. When Tom came home that night, he avoided my eyes. He walked past me, muttering under his breath. I heard him in the other room, raising his voice at Ruth. "You told him everything!" "I told him nothing," she hissed back. "Then how did he know?" Their argument escalated until the walls trembled. I stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the railing, not afraid anymore, just done pretending. Finally, his shout cracked through the house, raw and furious. "You'll ruin this family!" Filing that document felt like breathing again. I stood at the counter, the clerk stamping each page with slow, practiced precision. The ink left a faint mark on my fingertips. When she slid the folder back toward me, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. For months, they had trembled every time I signed my name. Not today. The courthouse smelled of old paper and coffee. Somewhere down the hall, a clock ticked loud enough to count seconds between decisions. The sound steadied me. It meant the world kept moving, no matter who tried to stop it. Outside, the air was sharp, almost cleansing. I called my lawyer. "It's done," I said. He exhaled softly. "Good. Keep your phone close. They'll find out fast." He was right. Within an hour, Tom was at the door, voice raised before he even crossed the threshold. "You filed a complaint? After everything I've done for you?" I met his glare. "You mean everything you've taken? You're ungrateful. And you're predictable." Ruth appeared behind him, eyes wet, playing the part she'd perfected. "How could you do this to your own family?" she said, clutching her chest. "After all we've given you?" "All you've given me?" I said quietly. "You took my name off every account, turned friends against me, and called it love." She gasped, offended at the truth. "People will hear about this," she warned. "They should," I said. "That's the point." By noon, the neighborhood grapevine had come alive. I heard from a friend that Ruth had already told the neighbors I was losing touch with reality. It was her favorite story, one that painted her as the saint and me as the unstable wife who'd lost gratitude and grace. But gossip had never frightened me the way silence did. My lawyer sent me copies of the official filing, complaint number, attached exhibits, time-stamped acknowledgement. Seeing it written in black and white gave the chaos shape. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was recordable fact. The legal fees hit harder than I'd expected. I'd already paid the retainer from what little remained of my savings, and each consultation added another few $100s. "You could drop it," my lawyer said carefully, "but I don't think you will." "No," I said. "I've already paid too much in other ways." That afternoon, he suggested arranging quiet press coverage. "If this goes public, they can't twist the narrative," he said. "I don't want pity," I told him. "Then let it be about accountability." I agreed. At 3:00 p.m., I sat on the courthouse steps with the folder on my lap, watching the minute hand move past the half hour. The building cast a long shadow across the concrete, reaching toward me like memory itself. A woman passing by glanced at the papers and smiled softly. "That's a brave thing," she said. "It's just paper," I replied. "Paper changes everything," she said, before walking away. Her words lingered longer than they should have. She was right. Paper had built the cage I'd lived in, and now it might unlock it. At home that evening, Tom stormed into the living room again, his phone glowing with missed calls. "You've humiliated us," he said. "You humiliated yourself," I said. "You'll regret this, Elaine." "I already did. For years." Ruth's voice drifted from the kitchen, pleading now. "Please, think of how this looks. The neighbors are talking." "I stopped living for their approval," I said. "Then you've lost everything that matters," she whispered. "No," I said, standing. "I'm finally learning what matters." As the argument died down, I looked at the clock above the mantel. Its hands pointed toward 5. The same hour I used to set the table, waiting for him to come home. Now it marked something else. Time reclaimed. That night my lawyer called again. "They've been served," he said. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "By sunset," he added, "they were served with notice." They didn't expect me to show up alone. When I walked into the courthouse, heads turned, not because I was dramatic, but because I was calm. Calm scared them. I carried one folder in my hand, the same one that had lived on my kitchen table for months, filled with every proof they thought I'd never collect. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old air. A glass of water sat on the table, catching the dull reflection of overhead lights. I sat down beside my lawyer, who nodded once, silent but steady. "You've got this," he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need reassurance. I just needed this to end. When the judge entered, Tom wouldn't look at me. Ruth, however, made a show of it. Eyes wide, face fragile, a handkerchief clutched too tightly. I knew that act. I'd lived under it for years. The hearing began with my lawyer's voice, slow and deliberate. He laid out the timeline, then opened the folder. "We present the following," he said. "Audio evidence, witness testimony, and documented proof of property misappropriation." He played the first recording. Tom's voice filled the room, harsh and cold. "She'll be gone soon," he'd said, in that conversation I once thought no one would hear. The words hit harder this time, surrounded by silence. Ruth flinched, but kept her composure. The judge glanced toward her. "Is that your voice as well?" She hesitated. "It sounds altered." The lawyer pressed play again. Ruth's voice followed, clear, cruelly amused. "She won't fight back. She never does." I didn't move. I just stared at the table, watching the condensation slide down the side of that water glass. Tom's lawyer stood, trying to regain ground. "Your Honor, these recordings—" The judge raised a hand. "I'll decide their weight." Then came the witness testimony. Tom's brother entered quietly, looking tired but firm. "I saw the bruises," he said, "and I recorded part of what he said afterward." Tom shouted from his seat, "You're lying!" The judge's gavel struck once. "Order." Every echo of that gavel sounded like a year of my life closing behind me. The lawyer presented the property papers next, the deeds, the bank withdrawals, the proof of financial manipulation. Each page turned like a step closer to daylight. My name was missing on nearly every document, erased from accounts and contracts I'd once co-signed. Ruth started crying softly. "We were trying to protect her," she said. "She wasn't well." The judge looked up. "And yet somehow her finances remained useful to you." For the first time, Ruth didn't have a reply. The session stretched toward noon. The air grew heavier, not with tension, but with truth filling space that had long been empty. My lawyer concluded simply, this was not confusion, it was control. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. My voice didn't shake. I believed silence would keep peace. I was wrong. It only fed the cruelty. I'm not asking for pity, only for acknowledgement that this happened. The judge nodded slightly. The decision came quickly. Property reinstated, financial compensation reviewed, access restored. Tom's shoulders slumped. He didn't even argue. Ruth looked at me, eyes dry now, calculating something only she could see. But it didn't matter anymore. The spell had broken. I didn't feel victory. I felt release. The sound of the gavel marked it. 3 short strikes, final and cold. My lawyer gathered the papers, but I didn't move right away. I just stood there, letting the sound settle inside me. The gavel fell, and I finally exhaled. Winning didn't feel like winning at all. The morning after the hearing, I woke up before the sun, expecting relief to feel lighter than this. But the air in the house felt thick, unmoving, like everything inside it was waiting to see what I'd do next. The porch was quiet. A single chair sat near the railing, empty, the cushion faded from months of neglect. Across the street, curtains shifted when I stepped outside. No one waved. Justice had been served, yes, but in neighborhoods like ours, truth came with social interest attached. By 9:00 a.m., I walked to the corner store for milk. The cashier, who used to chat endlessly about her grandchildren, avoided eye contact. "Cash or card?" she asked without looking up. "Card," I said softly. My balance had recovered a little since the judge ordered partial restitution, enough to pay the bills and keep the lights steady. But money couldn't buy ease. On my way back, I passed Ruth's house. The windows were drawn, the driveway empty. A neighbor whispered that her health was declining. No one said what that meant. Tom hadn't been seen in days. His truck was gone, maybe for good. I should have felt closure. Instead, it felt like standing in the middle of an empty street after a storm. Everything still, but nothing whole. That afternoon, the mail arrived. I sorted through bills, ads, and then one small folded letter. No name, no return address. Inside, just a single line. "You did the right thing." The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. For a moment, I sat down on the porch step, the letter trembling between my fingers. It wasn't about approval, it was acknowledgement. Proof that someone, somewhere, had seen the truth and didn't turn away. Later that day, I walked down the block again. A few neighbors nodded this time, hesitant but real. One older woman stopped me halfway. "We heard what happened," she said gently. "Took courage." "I just wanted it to stop," I replied. "Sometimes that's all it takes," she said. The evening drifted in quietly. The sound of birds faded, replaced by the faint hum of air from the vents inside. I made tea, opened my laptop, and paid the remaining legal invoice, $620 still outstanding. It hurt to see the number, but at least it was mine to pay. As I sat by the window, I noticed something small but clear. My reflection no longer looked afraid. It looked steady, even tired, but alive. When night settled, I turned off the lights and stepped onto the porch again. The street lights flickered, and somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice before the silence returned. Ruth's mailbox overflowed with unopened letters. The same neighbors who once brought her casseroles now crossed the street without stopping. Justice had its own way of circling back. The next morning I found the porch chair pushed slightly out of place, as if the wind had moved it, or maybe someone had sat there for a moment, thinking. The folded letter rested on the table beside it. I left it there. Some words don't need framing or memory, they just need space to exist. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone for messages or updates. No threats, no apologies, no demands, just quiet. I realized that peace isn't loud or certain. It doesn't announce itself with applause or forgiveness. It simply replaces the noise once made by fear. Peace, I learned, can sound like silence. The bed was finally mine again, but I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge, staring at the dent in the mattress where he used to lie. The air felt heavy with memory. Even after everything, the room still smelled faintly like him, soap, cologne, and something metallic that never quite left the sheets. I opened the window to let fresh air in. Morning light crept across the floor, touching the dresser, the lamp, the framed photograph I hadn't moved yet. The walls looked different now, bare, exposed, as if waiting for permission to belong to me again. The first thing I did was strip the bed. The old sheets carried too much history. I folded them tightly, as if containing what couldn't be undone, then stuffed them into a garbage bag. The clean linen had been sitting in the closet for months. It smelled like detergent and distance, and when I spread it over the mattress, the sound of fabric smoothing out was the first piece I'd heard in years. On the nightstand sat Ruth's half-empty perfume bottle. I picked it up, turned it once in my hand, and then set it gently in the trash. It wasn't anger, it was closure. Tom's old watch was next. It had stopped at 11:42 months ago, the same night I'd first slept on the couch after one of our worst arguments. I placed it in the drawer and closed it softly. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. It was strange how a sound that used to blend into life now felt like proof that I was still here. I walked to the mirror and wiped the dust from its frame. My reflection looked older, but lighter. By 6:30 a.m., the sun was high enough to touch the curtains. I drew them open. The neighborhood outside was waking up. Children heading to school, cars pulling out of driveways. Life continued, indifferent to what had been lost or restored. I wasn't bitter about that anymore. The phone rang once. It was my lawyer. "Good news," he said. "The final restitution cleared this morning. Your account should show it by noon." "How much exactly?" I asked. "Just under $14,000. You're square now." "Square," I repeated quietly. The word didn't mean rich. It meant free. After we hung up, I sat on the bed again. The clean sheets were cool under my palms. I noticed a small photograph on the floor, one I hadn't seen in years. It showed us at a dinner party, smiles too bright, hands posed like strangers pretending to belong together. I slipped it into a drawer without looking at it twice. Some memories didn't deserve display. Around mid-morning, I brewed coffee and carried the mug upstairs. The smell filled the room, stronger than the ghost of perfume that once clung there. I stood near the doorway, breathing it in, realizing that scent could change meaning. It could shift from reminder to renewal. Then I noticed the couch in the hallway, the one that had been my bed for months. I brushed my hand over its armrest. The indent where my head used to rest was still there, soft and shallow, a record of endurance. I thought about moving it out, but not yet. Maybe it deserved to stay, just not in the center of my life anymore. The light switch by the door had fingerprints smudged into the plate. His, maybe hers too. I wiped it clean and flipped it once. The bulb flickered, then steadied. The whole room brightened. It was quiet, but not lonely. I changed the pillowcases, added a new blanket, and set a small vase with one white flower on the windowsill. I didn't buy the flower for beauty. It was for balance, something alive in a space that had only held echoes. As the afternoon stretched, I sat at the desk and wrote a short note to myself. This house is mine again. Every wall, every inch of quiet. I folded it and placed it under the pillow. A promise, not to anyone else, but to the version of me who had survived. When the sun began to fade, the room glowed gold for a moment before turning pale. I turned off the light, slipped under the new sheets, and listened. The air moved softly through the vents, the faint creak of wood settling. It felt like the house had been waiting too. I lay down, and felt the house breathe again. His brother mailed me something Ruth never meant to send. The envelope was thick, sealed unevenly, as if torn and re-glued in haste. My hands trembled when I saw her handwriting. It had been weeks since the hearing, weeks since silence replaced accusation, and yet seeing her name again brought a chill I couldn't explain. I opened it carefully. The paper smelled faintly like old perfume and smoke, a scent I hadn't realized I remembered until it filled the room. The first line was short. "If this reaches you, I'm already gone." I sat down, heart pounding, and read every word. She wrote about fear of losing control, fear of being forgotten. She confessed that the money she took wasn't for greed, it was for power. Power keeps people from leaving, she said. There were pages of justification, manipulation painted as protection, and then something else, guilt, thin and fragile. "I lied to him," she admitted. "I lied about her. I lied because truth meant watching myself disappear." The letter shifted halfway through. She described the accounts she hid, the documents she forged, and how she used me as the excuse. It was all there. Dates, transfers, the missing property deeds, proof I had begged for years ago, vindication, handwritten in blue ink. But I didn't feel joy. I felt heavy. Her words were both confession and weapon. Every sentence seemed to beg forgiveness while twisting the knife again. She ended it with one last plea. "Tell him I only wanted peace." I folded the letter slowly, pressed the creases flat. Outside, the afternoon light stretched long across the floor. I could hear the faint tick of the kitchen clock downstairs, each sound measured, patient. I thought about the years she had stolen, not just money, but time. Around 4:00 p.m., I called her brother. "Where did you find this?" "In her desk," he said quietly. "She must have written it before everything came out. I thought you should know." Did she mean for me to read it? I don't think she meant for anyone to. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "She wasn't well, Elaine. Not for a long time." "I know," I said. "But knowing doesn't undo the damage." After we hung up, I placed the letter on the table and stared at it. The ink had bled in places, tiny blue smudges near the bottom edge. It almost looked like fingerprints. I imagined her sitting there, writing between guilt and denial, and wondered if part of her wanted to be caught. I took one final look and whispered, "I forgive you, but I won't forget." Then I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and held the corner of the page to the flame. It caught quickly, curling into black edges and ash. The smell filled the room, burning paper and faint perfume, blending into something strangely clean. I didn't do it out of hate. I did it because the past didn't deserve a shrine. Still, I kept a photocopy in my file drawer, not as evidence but as memory, a record of where silence ends. When the fire went out, I stood in the quiet. My reflection in the window looked older but unburdened. Outside, the mailbox flag was still raised from the morning delivery, a small red reminder of things that arrived too late. I whispered, "No one sleeps on my couch again." I made coffee and didn't wait for permission. The act felt small, but it carried weight. For months, every sound in this kitchen had belonged to someone else. The footsteps, the slammed drawers, the silence that used to mean danger. Now it was mine again. Steam curled from the mug, lifting into the morning air. The smell was simple, grounding. I watched sunlight spread across the counter, touching the same space that once held unpaid bills, bruised trust, and quiet dread. The first bill of the day sat unopened beside the sugar jar. I didn't flinch. I tore it open, glanced at the amount, and smiled faintly. Paid in full last week. The rest would follow, one by one, steady as breath. The clock on the wall ticked evenly, not as a threat, but as rhythm. I used to dread its sound. Every passing minute had felt like proof I was trapped. Now it just told time. I carried the mug to the table, where sunlight reached my hands. The warmth spread through my fingers. I'd stopped wearing rings, but the faint tan lines remained, pale reminders of years defined by someone else's rules. I traced them once, then let my hands rest flat. At 7:10 a.m., the mail truck stopped outside. The sound didn't raise my pulse anymore. The driver waved, and I waved back. No court letters, no warnings, just a magazine and a small envelope marked personal. I left it unopened, choosing peace over curiosity. I started a habit of writing 1 page a day, not confessions, not regrets, just small truths. Yesterday I wrote, "Freedom isn't loud." Today I added, "Healing looks like routine." The house felt different now. The same floors, the same walls, but none of the fear. The couch, the one that had carried months of sleepless nights, sat under a clean white cover. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was memory, proof that survival could look ordinary. Around 9 o'clock a.m., I stepped outside. The air was cool, the sun sharp. My neighbor waved from her garden. She'd stopped avoiding me weeks ago. "Morning," she called. "Morning," I answered. "You look good today." "I feel okay," I said. And it was true. When I came back inside, I opened the kitchen window and let the air in. The curtains swayed gently, brushing against the coffee mug on the sill. The steam had thinned, but it still rose. A quiet, invisible signal that the day had started. I glanced at the refrigerator. A small magnet held the last lawyer's receipt. Final payment confirmed. I'd kept it there, not as a reminder of cost, but of completion. Money once meant power for them. Now it meant independence for me. The clock ticked again, soft and unhurried. For a moment, I just listened. That same sound had once marked every argument, every held breath, every night I counted seconds to morning. But this time, it was different. "You'll regret this," I remembered Ruth saying once, her voice thick with warning. Now, when I replayed that memory, the words came out of my own mouth, changed, lighter, stronger. I remember this. It wasn't defiance anymore. It was acknowledgement. Every scar, every cost, every hour I'd spent trying to keep peace while losing myself. They were all part of the record. I rinsed the cup and set it beside the sink. Sunlight hit the counter again, bright and even. I didn't rush to move it or hide the shine. Outside, a dog barked. A bus pulled away down the street. Ordinary sounds. Life moving forward without permission, slips, or explanations. The couch stayed where it was, covered neatly, a quiet monument to what endurance looks like when it finally exhales. I sat by the window one last time before starting the day. The coffee was gone, but the warmth lingered. I thought about how silence used to scare me, how I used to fill it with apologies or excuses just to keep peace. Now, silence sounded like choice. For the first time, the clock sounded kind. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story. With respect and gratitude,